The Story of Beginnings and the Tale of a Soul. On January 4th, 1990, just 10 minutes before dawn, Ines was giving birth. Her husband, Momen, was standing outside with their little daughter, Vala, his heart racing with a mix of anxiety and joy. Finally, the midwife called out, "Congratulations, doctor. It's a boy." They named the boy Mustafa after his grandfather, from his father's side. That Mustafa is me. My father, Dr. Momen, was the youngest university professor in the Faculty of Science at Asayat University. He married my mother, Ines, who was his student at the university. After she graduated from the Faculty of Education, she earned her master's degree shortly after their marriage. Not long after, my grandfather's health began to decline, and my father would frequently travel to Luxor to bring him to Asayat for treatment with the help of my uncle Zaria. Around the same time, my father applied for a job opportunity in Saudi Arabia after failing to secure one in the UAE. In September 1991, my father ran into a colleague from the university who asked him, "Welcome back, doctor. Did you just return from Saudi Arabia?" My father was shocked and replied, "Return from where? I've been here all along." The colleague said, "But a telegram arrived for you a while ago, offering a contract." My father was stunned and said, "I never saw it at that moment." My father decided to travel to Cairo on one of the old public buses, a journey that took over 10 hours. When he arrived at the Saudi Cultural Office, they told him, "You can't enter without the telegram." My father sat on his Samsonite suitcase, feeling defeated. After a while, a Saudi man came out and asked my father, "Who are you looking for?" My father explained the whole story. The man asked, "What's your specialty?" My father replied, "Botany." The man said, "Come with me. I need you." They went upstairs, and the man handed my father a contract saying, "Trust in God." And so, my father traveled to Saudi Arabia alone to arrange the paperwork for our relocation. We all reunited at the end of the year, after my grandfather passed away on December 7th, 1991. After that, we all moved to Saudi Arabia to settle down. Can you guess which region we moved to? North or south? Write your guesses in the comments. The day we flew to Bisha, New World. Nothing in the world could have prepared us for how this journey would change our lives. The day we flew from Egypt to Bisha was anything but ordinary. It marked the beginning of a new chapter, filled with challenges and unforgettable stories. Bisha, located in the southern region of Saudi Arabia, was a completely new world for us. Its weather, stunning natural landscapes, valleys, and palm trees made us feel like we had entered a life entirely different from Egypt. Back then, security wasn't as tight as it is now, so we lived in a rented apartment in the city center. The infrastructure was simple, and water was delivered via a water tanker that filled a well, from which it was pumped to a rooftop tank. That rooftop became our escape. It was where we played, as my father worked at the teachers' college, and my mother didn't have a job. On the rooftop, there was a large aerial connected to the TV to pick up signals from Saudi satellite channels, which were the only ones available at the time. My father jokingly called them Force 1 and Force 2. Entertainment options were limited, but there was a charm to the simplicity of those days. We had toys, like penguins that climbed stairs and then slid down, and a cat that carried its kittens with a magnet. I was a curious child, always wanting to know how things worked. One day I stuck my finger in the cat's mouth to see how it held the kittens, and of course, the toy broke. My father got angry and said, "You're a troublemaker." I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I felt scared and guilty. On October 31st, 1992, my mother went to the hospital and gave birth to a girl. Among the luxuries we had was an Atari console, which had games like Contra and Tank Battle. One day while playing in the kitchen, I accidentally broke a plate. My mother got upset and said, "May you be cut off, and your name too." I felt like she didn't love me, or that she resented my presence. As Ring grew older, I would sit and talk to her while she slept, holding her doll the way my mother held Ring. Our choices were limited, but there was an innocence and simplicity to those days. Finally, I stepped outside the house I had always lived within, the confines of our home familiar, safe and comfortable, but deep down, I felt a whisper: the world is bigger than these walls. That's what made my heart race when I finally stepped out of the cage I had been trapped in during that period. We were used to playing inside the house or at the Shire Market when my parents went shopping. That was our only escape, our little world. But as we grew older, we started going with my father to play at the college on the bike he bought for me, and voila, that bike was our little dream. And with its training wheels, we felt like kings of the world. One day while riding the bike, I fell and started crying. I expected my father to comfort me, but instead he scolded me. I felt hurt and scared later. I overheard him telling a colleague, "When a child falls and cries, you scold them so they forget the pain of the fall." I was too young to fully understand, but that moment stayed with me. Despite not having other kids around, my father's colleagues would come over to play with us, and we even traveled together to Mecca for Umrah. Of course, as a 4-year-old boy, I didn't know how to behave without walls. I saw a pigeon and chased it, only to realize my parents and the others had disappeared. I felt alone and fear overwhelmed me. A stranger came over, took me and sat with me outside the harem, giving me food to feed the pigeons. I got distracted until my father finally found me. That was the first time I got a zero haircut, and I'll never forget that day or the moment. The beginning of independence and professional experience. This was the new chapter in my life, one where I was in full control. After escaping the curse of Egyptian education, I faced a big question: what's next? For the first time in my life, I felt free, but that freedom came with great responsibility. I knew the road wouldn't be easy, but I believed every step would lead me to something better. I decided to start my professional journey. I told you before that my father had bought each of us an apartment in our names. When he traveled for the second time, he bought a new apartment for me to settle in after marriage. At the time, even though I was an adult, I didn't feel grateful for what was being done for me. I saw it as his duty toward me, a right I was entitled to. I opened an advertising company in my apartment, which was opposite the train station, and we furnished the Republic Street apartment, where I could potentially get married. The people who helped me stand on my own feet were those I met by chance, who became friends. I learned a big truth. Work isn't just about degrees or skills. It's about relationships and trust. At the same time, I was developing myself outside of work. I started reading more, learning new skills. Every step I took boosted my confidence and made me feel capable of changing my reality. But I always felt like something was missing: marriage. I talked to my friend Mohammed, who was engaged, and he told me about a girl named Samar, the sister of a friend's wife. I asked him to arrange a meeting so we could get to know each other better, and if there was mutual interest, I would propose. We met, and I felt a strong similarity between her personality and mine. I thought, this is the one. During the vacation, my father came down and we proposed to her uncle. We got engaged and agreed to have a simple wedding at home, but before the wedding in December 2nd, 2014, I wanted to surprise her and organized a wedding celebration. However, I was shocked when she got upset with me for not involving her in the design and spoke to me harshly. She went to her uncle, who tried to calm her down, but I left feeling angry and decided to call off the engagement. Her sister's husband came to me and said, I'm sorry, just bear with her. She doesn't mean it. I wish I hadn't listened to him. We signed the marriage contract on January 17th. From one shock to another. Imagine marrying someone to find out she avoids intimacy. I tried everything but nothing worked. One day she left the house, and when I asked where she was going, she said, "It's none of your business." I held back my anger and said, "Go ahead." After she left, I locked the door from the outside so she couldn't get back in. When she returned, she realized her mistake and came back to take revenge. What do you think she did? Stay tuned for the next episode. Finally, I got my revenge. When Samar returned home, I thought she had realized her mistake, even if she didn't apologize. But unfortunately, the truth was shocking. It turned out she came back to take revenge on me. I'm someone who always tries to live in peace with others and avoids drama, but clearly, Samar had a different plan. So what did she do when I returned? She spent a month pretending to be sick or asleep. Finally, I decided to be honest and confront her. This happened on May 13th, 2020. I said, "Samar, I don't understand why you're acting this way, but if there's a problem, let's talk." She said, "I don't feel safe. You kicked me out of the house before." I laughed in frustration, trying to keep my cool, and said, "No, of course not. Your divorce is cheaper." But unfortunately, the response I got was filled with malice and hatred. At that moment, I realized the issue was bigger than just a misunderstanding. She suddenly grabbed my shirt collar and tried to hit me. Even though I could have easily overpowered her, I held back. I ended up slapping her lightly, just enough to make her stop. I decided to handle the situation wisely and not retaliate in the same manner. I knew that responding with anger would only make things worse, so I left the room and locked the door behind me. She started packing her bags. Wanting to leave, I told her, "If you're taking the goal, you need to write a receipt acknowledging you received it, or I'll call the police first to document the situation." She called the person she didn't know again, who turned out to be her lawyer, and he advised her to write the receipt. The situation was resolved and everyone left. I started thinking about the root causes of the problem and tried to understand why she had reached the point of seeking revenge. I discovered it was the lawyer. You might ask why, because shortly after, I received a court notice that she had filed a case against me for dissipating marital assets. Normally, court notices take 3 weeks to arrive, but this one came immediately, meaning the lawyer had filed the case while she was still living with me. He wanted her to provoke me into hitting her, so he could file for divorce on grounds of harm. But thank God he stood by me and helped me protect myself from any harm. But the most important lesson I learned was, not everyone who appears to love you is sincere. So we must be cautious in our relationships and know who deserves our trust. And you, if someone tries to take revenge on you or harm you, what would you do? Share your experiences with relationships in the comments, and stay tuned for the next episode, where I'll talk about how I dealt with this toxic relationship. The routine at the factory was unbearable for an ordinary person, guys. Imagine a day that starts at 5 a.m. and every detail in it is a challenge. From the moment I wake up, I know the day will be full of work and exhaustion, but at the same time, it's also full of opportunities to learn and grow. As soon as I enter, I'm in the middle of a massive world of machines, everything moving with speed and precision. The factory isn't an ordinary place. It's a place where every step has its rules. I started by supervising the transportation of sand, and little by little I began learning from the workers the details of every task they performed. I never looked down on them, and because they noticed that, they were eager to teach me everything they knew. It felt like we were family, not just an engineer and workers. Over time, I became the manager of an entire project, and after a while, I was managing multiple projects in the company. I started developing myself and working on every task with my own hands. I loved the work. I tried shaping iron rods, tying foundations, and even breaking with a sledgehammer. My goal was to measure how many hours each task took to complete, and I became good at distinguishing between those who came to work and those who just wanted to pass the time. I knew when and how to motivate everyone to work faster if the situation required it, whether by paying overtime or letting them leave early if they finished the task quickly. In a single day, I would walk more than 20 kilometers to monitor all the sites twice a day and solve any technical problems the supervisors faced. My blood was always boiling, and I worked 7 days a week without vacations, except during holidays. Even though I was very irritable, I only raised my voice 3 times in 3.5 years when the situation demanded it. My relationship with over 250 colleagues, supervisors, workers, and even engineers and department heads in the factory was excellent, but life wasn't always rosy. There were downsides too. For example, Saturdays were off for factory employees, so if I had a sugar crash, I suffered greatly. I also struggled with regulating my sugar levels, because if I took too much insulin, I'd crash, and if I took too little, my sugar would stay high most of the day. Life doesn't give you everything. Everything you take is a double-edged sword. You either use it right or it kills you. Finally, after more than a year of work, I got my reward, guys. The exhaustion and effort I went through since graduating weren't easy, but in the end, every effort comes with a reward. I was very inclined to understand myself more, which led me to read about psychology and esoteric sciences like astrology. I used to say that it didn't make sense for 2 people born under the same zodiac sign to have different appearances, voices, lifestyles, and destinies. There must be deeper secrets I needed to learn. While I was busy between work and reading, I suddenly found myself facing a big opportunity. My father told me about the daughter of his lifelong friend, Shema. Her father had complained to my father about her ex-fiancé, who was my father's colleague in the department. Of course, my father told him about my experience with Sama. Her father said the family was good, and my father asked if I'd like to meet her. I agreed. I found someone whose family we knew. After a failed experience with strangers, we got engaged on July 8, 2016, and married on September 8, 2016, after 2 months, because I was ready and they were too. There was no need for a long engagement, especially since I believe the person's true character shows in tough situations at home, not over the phone or outings. We traveled to Hurghada for a lovely period where we enjoyed ourselves. Those days were full of laughter and joy, and every moment was a beautiful memory. But a month later, life turned upside down when she felt unusually tired. We decided to check, and when we saw the doctor, she said words I'll never forget. "Congratulations, your wife is pregnant, guys." The joy I felt at that moment was indescribable. It was a huge surprise, but the most beautiful surprise one could ever receive. From the day our lives changed, we started planning for the future differently, and all our thoughts were focused on preparing for the new arrival, of course. She would often argue with me because all my time was spent at the factory and I'd come back exhausted. Even though she was right from her perspective, she didn't realize I had to work so we could eat, live, and enjoy life. I always tried to explain this to her, and even saved a good amount of money for her to start an online accessories business. I helped her find the best materials at the lowest prices. I also changed the color of my car to this one. What do you think of it? A new feeling I experienced for the first time. Fatherhood, guys. No words can describe the joy and responsibility I felt when I found out I was going to be a father on June 19, 2017. It was a moment filled with mixed emotions: joy, fear, excitement, and anxiety. I felt responsible for a new life, and that was a huge responsibility. I started thinking about everything differently, from expenses to raising the child, and even the future we'd live together. I knew I had to leave the factory job and find a private job that would give me more time to spend with my wife and son, whom we named Moment after my father. The first time I saw the child, I felt an indescribable love, different from anything I'd ever experienced before. Every move he made, every sound he uttered melted my heart. And those of you who have experienced parenthood, share your feelings when you had your first child in the comments. And indeed, as soon as the project slowed down at the factory in December 2nd, 2017, I decided it was time to end my journey there. I looked for a suitable location for a women's accessories store, as the group was already established with 16,000 followers, until I found a store with a good location and reasonable rent. We decided to name the store the Lady Boutique. Of course, the renovation wasn't easy for me, and with that I finally left the factory and had more space and time to spend with my family. A new beginning at 28 in 2018. Turning 28 in 2018 was a milestone for me. It was my first birthday after the birth of Momen, and it felt completely different, guys. This birthday had a special flavor, because I now felt the weight of being a father and the new responsibilities that came with it, especially since I had just opened the new store. It was the start of a year full of hope and challenges. But why, let's continue and find out together. Of course, we divided the roles for the new store. I was responsible for sales and finding new suppliers with better quality and lower prices. I also handled shipping and sorting the goods. My wife would come to help price and arrange the items, and the rest of the day she focused on marketing. The store was open from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. only, but despite that, we gained recognition in a site over time, and the number of followers grew from 16,000 to over 40,000. We expanded our offerings and rented the adjacent store, furnishing it and adding home goods, clothing, and children's accessories. The big turning point came in mid-2018, when I went for a checkup with my friend Dr. Momen to check on my eyes. I discovered I had bleeding in my eyes, and he referred me to Dr. Ahmed, who specialized in this field. When I visited him, I found out I had atrophy in the center of my right eye's vision and bleeding in my left eye. I needed to undergo argon laser sessions to stop the bleeding in both eyes. After a short while, I noticed my vision coming and going in my left eye. I went back to Dr. Ahmed, who told me it was the beginning of a retinal detachment and that I needed surgery. He said he could perform it, but he preferred a doctor in Cairo named Dr. Mohammed, who was highly skilled in eye surgery. At that time, my close friend Mustafa Momen and my mom drove me to Cairo in his car to the National Eye Center. We used GPS, and God forgive me, it directed us to Abu Zabel instead of the correct location on the Suez Road. After a long and chaotic journey, we finally arrived at the correct Forest Street. When we got there, they discovered my blood pressure was dangerously high at 220/110. We went to a doctor to regulate my blood pressure, and I finally had the surgery. When we returned to a site, we met Dr. Peter, who said something I'll never forget. All of this is because of diabetes, and if it has reached your eyes, it must have already damaged your kidneys. Oh, what happened to my kidneys? Stay tuned for the next episode to find out. When we returned to a site, Dr. Peter shocked us with a statement. I'll never forget, all of this is because of diabetes. And if it has reached your eyes, it must have already damaged your kidneys. When I found out I needed to check my kidneys, I was scared, but at the same time, I knew I had to face reality. What happened to my kidneys? Were the results bad, or was there still hope? These were all questions I kept asking myself, and I knew I wouldn't feel at ease until I had the answers at that time. My father had finally returned from Saudi Arabia, and everything seemed to be falling into place. We immediately traveled to Mansour to see the renowned doctor, Mohammed Sob, who prescribed excellent treatment for my blood pressure and recommended I undergo a fistula surgery. This is a surgical procedure where an artery and vein are connected to allow blood to be drawn during dialysis. Over time, my body started retaining about 24 kilos of excess fluid. I was admitted to the intensive care unit, where the experience was more painful than the illness itself, the sounds of groaning from other patients. And I was the only one who could walk among them. Every now and then blood samples were taken from me, and the arterial blood draw was particularly painful because the needle had to go deep into my arm. Since arteries aren't as superficial as veins, I would escape the chaos at night by standing alone in the hallway. One night a nurse came up to me and said, "Are you upset about the arterial blood draw?" I replied, "Imagine children who don't even have veins to draw blood from, and we have to shave their heads to find a spot. Thank God for what we have." When they decided I needed dialysis, they inserted a maraca, a long blood tube placed in the neck vein. Because the fistula surgery was still 3 weeks away, the dialysis experience was extremely exhausting, and I pray no one has to go through it. Guys, share your experiences with tough health challenges in the comments. We'll continue the story in the next episode. Stay tuned. Forgive me. The last episode was a bit depressing, so I'll keep this part brief regarding the health issues, because the details aren't helpful for my content, and I want you all to stay optimistic, because every door that closes in our face is the beginning of a new, brighter one. Life isn't always rosy, but that's its nature. Some days are tough and some are sweet, but what we learn from challenges is that we're stronger than we think, and every experience teaches us something new. During the 8 months of dialysis, I joined a savings group and bought a car. With the money I saved over time, I fixed it up bit by bit until it was in good condition. The purpose of the car was to teach my wife how to drive, since I could no longer drive due to my visual impairment. I also delved deeper into astrology, trying to understand why two people born under the same zodiac sign could be so different in appearance, voice, and behavior. I learned that each person has a unique imprint determined by their birth chart, which is a circle of 12 zodiac signs, with planets distributed according to the day of birth. I also discovered that the ascendant isn't the events in the newspapers, but the zodiac sign rising on the horizon at the time of birth. Over time, my curiosity to delve deeper into this science grew, especially since it opened new doors for understanding myself and the people around me. My father also sold the Republic Street apartment and Luxor apartment and bought a new apartment in the Al-Azhar area, putting it in my mother's name. He also bought an apartment in Cairo in preparation for my kidney transplant and as a retreat for us in the future. Before selling the Republic apartment, we started renovating the Al-Azhar apartment and moved all the furniture there. Finally, on August 20th, 2019, I underwent the kidney transplant. I stayed with my parents for a month in Cairo and another month in Aside, even though the elevator wasn't installed yet, and we had to climb 5 flights of stairs. We decided to return home. During the surgery period, I wasn't following up on the store, and when I returned, I found that the capital had significantly decreased. So I decided to close the store and return to working from home. After that, a betrayal I didn't expect happened. What do you think happened? Write your guesses in the comments and stay tuned for the next episode, where the challenges never end. I was betrayed and cheated on, making me laugh forcibly. The situation was shocking, and I couldn't even believe what had happened. On a Saturday, when we usually gathered at my father's place with my siblings and their kids, my wife asked me if she could go to her mother's for lunch. With good intentions, I agreed. But while I was at my father's, I was shocked by a message from her saying she didn't want to live with me anymore and was asking for a divorce after more than 3 years of being good to her. Suddenly after the surgery, I became trash to her guys. This shock was huge, and I can't even express how I felt at that moment. When I went to her family's house the same day, thinking they knew what had happened, they said we don't know anything. I thought to myself, how long will you live in denial? And decided to leave saying, when you figure it out, let me know. Her mother said she says you don't care about her. I replied, who exactly doesn't care about whom? I left my factory job and opened the store because I cared. During the 8 months of dialysis, I didn't miss a single session. After the surgery, I stayed at my father's for a month, and she only visited me once. So, who doesn't care about whom? I left thinking about the next step. A few days later, her father called and said, I can convince her, but you have to promise to change. I agreed, and we met a third time alone at our house. I asked her, can you tell me what's bothering you that made you leave after all this time? She said it was about attention, and that I needed to change first. I asked, what else? She said personal hygiene. At that point, I realized they were just making things up. I asked her, have you ever felt I smelled bad, or that I approached you without showering? She said no. I told her, then seek God's guidance and pack your things to come back home. That same night, she said, I'm ready to come back, but on the condition that you change. I said okay. She added, and let me drive the car and get a license. At that moment, I realized the whole thing was just a ploy to manipulate me. And if I agreed, it wouldn't be the last time she'd leave. So I said, what if I sell the car altogether? She got very upset, and I confirmed all my suspicions. Her father said, just leave him to me. I'll handle him. As if someone who can't control his wife can handle a man, I told him. I'm more of a man than you and your fat self. And I walked away. What do you think I did next? Stay tuned for the next episode to find out how I got my revenge. Compensation comes faster than you think. Even though I knew my wife wasn't the problem, her submission to her mother's influence was her choice, and she was responsible for it. These issues coincided with the spread of the COVID-19 virus. I decided to look for a life partner who deserved to continue with me on my own. She had to have been raised in a home where she saw her father as the head of the household, so she would appreciate her husband the way her mother appreciated her father. But how would I find her? Simply, I would openly share all my flaws, and whoever accepted my flaws would appreciate my qualities. Over time, I kept searching until I finally found her. Now, she was a respectable girl from a well-known, honorable family around my age, which I saw as a big advantage. At the same time, I asked my lawyer friend, Mohammed, to mediate, so we could finalize the divorce without the chaos of the courts. Even though they weren't initially receptive to the idea, we pressured them until they agreed. They couldn't understand what had happened to me. My wife even told Mohammed, what's wrong with Mustafa? He's acting so strange all of a sudden. She didn't realize that as much as I had respected and cherished her, I couldn't stand to see her again. After the divorce, I got engaged, and 3 months later, we got married, becoming COVID-19 newlyweds. Guys, share your thoughts on the story so far and what you've learned from it. I'm grateful to all of you for sticking with this far, and I hope you're enjoying the journey. Stay tuned for the next episode, where I'll talk about new challenges, the struggle for survival. Manal and I had beautiful days together, watching movies, series, and cooking together. I also delved deeper into astrology after learning from my mentor, Ishan al-Mansani, and discovered many astrologers like Yusuf Allah, Hitham al-Omari, and Ali Noor. I decided to create an account where I could analyze birth charts for a fee. Have any of you had your birth chart analyzed before? Or have you had experiences with other esoteric sciences like intuition, clairvoyance, or tarot? Share in the comments. With the spread of the COVID-19 variant, we unfortunately all got infected, and I suffered greatly, especially since I was on immunosuppressants to prevent my body from rejecting the transplanted kidney. But all my efforts were nothing compared to the support of my mother, who had been my biggest supporter throughout my life. I wore 2 masks and tried to spend as much time as possible with her, while my father brought oxygen tanks home and took care of everything. On September 16, 2021, I was shocked by a call from my father saying, "The rest is in your life." I couldn't speak, and my feelings were a mix of sadness that I wouldn't see her again, and acceptance that she was in heaven. God willing, to God we belong, and to Him we shall return. Forgive me, I can't continue today, so we'll finish the story in the next episode. Stay tuned. We visited my father often, me and Mino, so he wouldn't be alone. He asked us to visit only on Thursdays and Fridays and leave on Saturdays after the family gathering, until he decided to remarry and got engaged, marrying on January 25, 2022. I wasn't upset at all by his decision because he truly needed someone to take care of him. Of course, I couldn't find a suitable job despite my strong experience in various fields because I was on government-funded treatment, and no job would cover the cost of my medication. So I decided to use the money I inherited from my mother to develop myself, part of which was in gold, and the rest I used to buy more gold. I also stopped astrological analysis because I started doubting its permissibility, but I couldn't find clear evidence against it. We traveled with Manal, my father, and his wife to Luxor and Aswan for a Nile cruise, and then to Cairo. It was a beautiful trip. Stay tuned for the next episode to continue our story. Manal got pregnant, and we're expecting a baby girl. Despite that, I still saw my son Moment regularly and played with him. Even if circumstances kept us apart, he would always remain close to my heart. The relationship between a father and son isn't just about play and laughter. It's built on love and understanding, making the son feel safe and secure. In August 2022, I sold some gold and bought shares in a real estate marketing company owned by a friend named Amar, and I worked with him too. In May, I met someone named Fauzi, a friend of Muhammad, my childhood friend since 2001. Fauzi was in a financial bind and was selling his goods at about a quarter of the wholesale price. I decided to help him and said, "Consider me a beer, and whenever you sell something, I'll take half the profit and you take the other half." Later, he asked me to lend him money to complete the paperwork for his shop's license and take out a loan, promising to return the money after a month with an additional 10% of the shop's revenue. I agreed at first and gave him the gold in installments to complete the procedures. Later, I realized this was usury since it involved a loan with interest. I told him I didn't want any just my money back. I also had him sign a check for the value of the gold, which was 120,000 Egyptian pounds at the time. Over time, I discovered he was a scammer who had deceived many people before me. The hardest part was that my childhood friend Muhammad was facilitating everything for Fauzi, always justifying his presence by saying he was helping me, while in reality, he was in cahoots with Fauzi. In September, I finally got the money from Amro's shares and immediately entered the stock market. My joy doubled when I received the money from the big scammer, Fauzi, and I cut ties with Muhammad, who had betrayed our decade-long friendship. Of course, the money's value was much lower compared to when it was in gold. But what happened taught me to be more confident in myself than in others. I had always felt a sense of inadequacy and shaky self-confidence due to my visual impairment. But over time, I started feeling capable of achieving many things and made good profits by the end of 2023. Thank God. And you? Do you have stories about a you that changed your life? Share in the comments what impacted you the most in 2023. Let us know if any of you entered a new field or achieved significant accomplishments. Stay tuned for the next episode, where I'll talk about my plans and dreams for 2024. 2024 was a year of big responsibilities. With the significant profits I made, thank God, a whirlwind of tasks that needed to be done opened up. The first was rewarding Mel for her patience and endurance during the past period. So I decided we'd travel to Hurghada. I also overhauled the car's engine and traveled to Cairo to fix all the car suspension system. I spent a lot of money. The water pump kept breaking, and since it was of poor quality, it kept malfunctioning. So I decided to buy a Sayer automatic pump. A new chapter: challenges and lessons. In 2024, I faced one of the most challenging periods of my life. It was a year of big responsibilities, significant losses, and profound lessons. Let me take you through what happened and how I navigated through it. Creating a new children's room. One of the first things I did in 2024 was create a new children's room. I wanted to make space for Momen, Fairuz, and a potential third child. I designed it to be cozy and welcoming, a place where my kids could feel safe and loved. This was especially important for Momen, who lived far from me. I wanted him to know that his place in my heart and home would always be there, no matter the distance. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. A stolen phone and a new beginning. I bought a new phone, but it was stolen by someone who pretended to be helping me on the street. It was frustrating, but I didn't let it break me. After a while, I bought another phone, this time with higher specifications. It felt like a fresh start. But little did I know, bigger challenges were on the horizon. The stock market crash, a hard lesson. I had invested a significant amount of money in the stock market, and for a while things were going well. But on October 23, 2024, everything changed. I had stayed up until 7 a.m. working, and when I woke up at 12:30 p.m., I was hit with devastating news. A popular trading platform announced it would delist the stocks I had invested in. Panic selling ensued, and I was asleep. During the crash, I was terrified of losing everything, and that fear led me to make rash decisions. Over time, my losses grew, and I felt completely helpless. The frustration and disappointment were overwhelming. I kept asking myself, why do I feel every time I put effort into something? When will I finally achieve financial stability? These questions haunted me, and I felt like I was stuck in a never-ending cycle of setbacks. But deep down, I knew there had to be a lesson in all of this. Discovering quantum psychology and Reiki. During this difficult time, I came across a woman named Eleanor who spoke about a technique called quantum psychology. It fascinated me, and I decided to dive deeper into it. My love for understanding myself and others had always driven me to explore fields like astrology and other esoteric sciences, and this felt like the next step in my journey. While researching online, I reconnected with an old friend from 2021 named Judy. She asked me about my goals for 2025, and I told her about my interest in quantum psychology and my desire to help people overcome their challenges. She suggested I also learn Reiki, a similar healing technique, and sent me links to courses and a valuable book to study. I felt like God was compensating me for my losses by opening new doors for me. Every time a door closed, another one opened, leading me to greater awareness and understanding. My friend Sama also advised me to create a visual representation of my goals for 2025 and set it as my phone wallpaper. This simple act helped me stay focused and motivated. The power of childhood trauma and subconscious beliefs. As I delved deeper into quantum psychology and Reiki, I discovered something that completely changed my perspective. I learned that the negative emotions we experience in certain situations aren't random. They're rooted in childhood trauma and subconscious beliefs. When we're children, we don't have the logic or discernment to understand the world around us. We rely on our parents for protection, love, and security. But when a parent scolds or punishes us, we don't see it as discipline. We internalize it as fear, insecurity, or a lack of love. These emotions get stored in our subconscious mind, forming limiting beliefs like I'm not safe, I'm not good enough, or I'm afraid. Our subconscious mind then replays these beliefs through reflections in our lives. For example, if you love a specific car brand, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Likewise, if you have a subconscious belief rooted in fear or loss, you'll keep attracting situations that trigger those emotions. Healing the root cause childhood trauma. I decided to apply what I learned to my own life. I traced back my recurring feelings of loss and discovered they were rooted in a childhood experience from 1994 when I was just 4 years old. During a family trip, I got separated from my parents and siblings, and the fear and helplessness I felt in that stayed with me. This single event became the root of all the losses I experienced later in life. Losing my mother, my marriage, my health, my projects, and even my friends. Every time I faced a loss, it triggered that same childhood fear. Once I addressed and healed that childhood trauma, the feeling of loss disappeared. I no longer felt attached to material things or are afraid of losing them. It was a profound realization that changed my life. The importance of healing childhood wounds. This journey taught me that childhood trauma is often the hidden barrier between us and our goals. Until we heal those wounds, we'll keep attracting situations that reflect our deepest fears and insecurities. But once we address the root cause, we can break free from the cycle and create the life we truly desire. A contest for healing. To wrap up this chapter of my life, I want to invite you to participate in a small contest. In the comments, share the first time you felt fear, the first time you felt a lack of self-confidence, the first time you felt a lack of belonging, the first time you felt injustice. I'll choose 3 people who share the most insightful responses and offer them free 2-hour sessions to help heal one of their childhood traumas. Let's work together to break free from the past and create a brighter future. Final thoughts. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. Your support means the world to me. And I hope my story has inspired you to reflect on your own life and the patterns that may be holding you back. Remember, every challenge is an opportunity to grow, and every closed door leads to a new beginning. So from the shadows of the past to the freedom of the present, a journey that starts with a session and ends with a new life full of confidence and inner peace. You also can overcome childhood trauma and enhance your mental and emotional health by booking a therapy session. using my unique strategy, which I've developed from the sciences I've learned throughout the various stages of my life. With love and gratitude, Mustafa Momen.